Little guy's moving a robotic arm with his own thoughts. Looks like a montage of technology's advancements throughout the years, specifically the one concerning robotics. And of course the military does the predictable thing and weaponizes robotics. Well, it seems that thanks to the military employing a lot of robots, they became more and more common to the general public, branding them as surrogates. Imagine having something to live your life for you.
Do everything for us, all in one machine.
Amazingly though, the crime rates in the US dropped 99%. Everything seems to be going peachy with the rise of surrogates, except these parade of protesters who reject the robot uprising.
You have been sold a lie.
This is all overseen by their leader, simply known as the Prophet.
Invasion of the inhuman.
And now we jump to the present day, where this fine gentleman is taking a ride in his fancy pants car. He just talked on the intercom with his father, and some biker follows him.
I love you too, Dad.
As he tells Armando, the driver, to take him to some place called 4 Point instead of the opera. This fancy car reaches a back alley club with a bit of a line, but the suit bribes him with moolah and he's in. The biker traces the suit to the club. In the club, of course, some crazy stuff's happening. Then the suit takes a stage dive from 2 stories. He survives to dance another day and chooses to do it with this lovely vixen. And then the biker sees the 2 partygoers. The suit claims his territory and tells him to get lost, but a flash of blue light strikes the alley. Then the biker zips out of there, and nearly a car. The car spins out of control and crashes at the club's entrance. Cops and a tow truck arrive, allowing them to lift up the crashed car and rescue a few still functioning surrogates. Another cop car comes to play. Might I introduce you to Agent Jennifer Peters and Agent Tom Greer. The cop says they were just going to file a vandalism report, but there's a surrogate unit that was unregistered. They quite literally take a look inside his mind, and his memory chip is completely fried. The girl that was with the frisky suited surrogate is said to be registered to a Cameron McAllister, but it's all radio silent on her owner's end.
Let's go talk to her operator.
The 2 agents then head for the operator. They arrive at the apartment with a surrogate showing them the door, but no one's answering. They unlock the door with the surrogate's keys, but no one seems to be in the apartment.
Cam?
And then the surrogate screams in horror, as it seems she has found Cameron McAllister. And by the looks of it, he's kinda dead. Agent Peters calls for a backup, while Agent Greer replays the footage from the surrogate console. This is all new to Agent Peters, and they call it a night. Agent Greer goes back home using the subway full of robots, and then arrives at his cozy little apartment. He pours a drink for this cane-looking fellow, and it seems to be his owner, so he's a surrogate as well. The real Agent Greer stands up slowly, and then walks up to what looks like a vacant kid's room. He goes to another room, and then he's caught by surprise by Maggie, his wife. She's surprised seeing him not using a surrogate. They walk to the kitchen and talk about a vacation.
Think about taking a break.
Maggie responds with Hawaii, since it would be perfect for swimming and other gnarly activities. Greer clarifies that he wants them personally to go on a vacation, but Maggie doesn't want to leave the surrogate units.
Can we talk about this another time?
And she makes an excuse to leave work, saying the surrogates are better. With that out of the way, let's go to West San Diego College, where these 2 boys try to wake up their friend, Jared Cantor. In the FBI's office, a discussion arises that these 2 got game-ended because of what happened to their surrogates. It was so bad to the point that their brains turned into soup. The leader of this operation deems a total media blackout, meaning they were sworn to secrecy not to tell the public that using a surrogate could be lethal.
I'm imposing a total media blackout.
After the meeting, Greer gets cracking to Cantor's last moments, which was the same flash of light. Just like in CSI, they find the biker dude, so they zoom in and enhance. And it seems like he's taken something out. Andy Stone, the FBI supervisor that was talking earlier, walks in on him, and Greer suggesting there might be foul play in this incident.
What is that?
Greer gets a call from one of the agents, saying that Jared's father is Lionel Cantor, the guy who invented surrogates. They're left in shock. Then the news breaks out that Jared's life has ended. They gave a little insight that he's the son of Lionel Cantor and was the former chairman of VSI. Too bad he and his associates had a dispute. Then Lionel was ejected from the company. Ever since his firing, Lionel has been absent from public sight. Let's jump to his mansion, where Greer immediately finds out that he might live here, but wrong. He and Agent Peters will be talking to one of his surrogates. They take the elevator with one of Dr. Cantor's guards, and then they're told to wait in the hall. Then they're welcomed in by Dr. Cantor himself, or rather his surrogate.
Dr. Cantor.
He tells a little story that he never really knew Jared as a kid, but he eventually lent him one of his surrogates. Agent Peter calls him out for lending that surrogate since each one is registered to a specific person. The doctor doesn't like that the two agents are pulling out the good cop, bad cop routine, but Greer says he's sympathetic to him since he did lose his son himself. Greer asks the doctor if he knows anyone who might want to harm Jared.
We're just trying to straighten out our facts.
But he doesn't know. The doctor realizes they might have ended Jared's life to inflict pain on him. The interview ends. Then we see the real old, weak Dr. Kenner crying out to the demise of his son. Peters and Greer visit the high-tech industries of VSI's own headquarters.
Where it all began.
They're met by Victor Welsh, the vice president of the company. He gives his regards to the two and their boss, Stone, because he knew him. Two of the legal departments sit in their meeting, and then Victor offers software upgrades for the cops, but Greer isn't interested. He's interested in knowing how a surrogate's head would explode from the inside, as he provides evidence. The legal twins say that Victor isn't allowed to answer that, and immediately go on the defense because the two might be implying VSI is involved with this. They defend that there's a failsafe for the operators so that if a surrogate even blows up, the operator is safe. Greer wants to know why the brains of the victims turned into mush, but the trio really can't answer that.
I don't know what you are.
So Greer spits on him and leaves. They enter the elevator, but instead of making an exit, Greer goes for the second floor. He and Peters go to the lab where they meet a toilet-hung Seth Steinberg. The two introduce themselves as FBI agents, and Seth looks at a chip under a microscope. He says every circuit must have fired off, resulting in that explosive aftermath. Seth walks him to an inner factory where surrogates are mass-produced. Here he shows him one example with no damages apart from the eyes, and the missing identity chip. Speaking of soldiers, here's a bunch of them in a war zone. One of them catches a lot of bullets, so his operator says he's down. Agent Greer and Peters are on the site. Then this general leads them around the military facility. He claims to know nothing because he thinks the military wouldn't make a weapon that would harm its own people. He also says that the military routinely removes motherboards and optics for analysis, so the trail goes cold from here. Back at the FBI office, Peters discovers someone named Miles Strickland. She says that Miles already has a criminal record and might be the biker guy who ended Jared and Cameron. He was already arrested, but they just let him walk. So someone is sus among us. Let's look at behind the scenes, where robots are monitoring all the cameras in the city. Then one of them gets a match. The two agents are told that their guy is already about to be surrounded by the one-time, so Agent Greer heads for the rendezvous, while Agent Peters is left to entertain the fat surveyor. Fat guy says the setup's so advanced they could access every surrogate on the grid. Totally not a violation of privacy.
I can tap into anyone's feed.
The gross oil bucket addresses himself as Saunders. Peter shakes this greasy hand and asks why he doesn't have a surrogate, which Saunders says he doesn't want to be a puppet. Pretty based if you ask me. An assault and battery goes in progress, so Saunders reports it to the superiors. They give him the green light, and then he cuts off the connection between the surrogates and the operators, allowing the woman to escape. He calls it buffering, but Peters isn't too pleased because this is quite shady.
That can't be legal.
The cops are already chasing down their biker guy, while Greer's in a police chopper. Peters talks to him over the intercom and tells him to be careful because they're approaching restricted airspace. Too bad Greer just ignores him and they continue that chase. The biker gets really rough with the road. The cops eventually use a pincer maneuver to corner him to an alley, where Miles Strickland is forced to pull out one more trick up his sleeve. What looks like an EMP cannon is blasted into the alley. Miles fires on the chopper as Greer narrowly dodges it, but the pilot's not so lucky. Greer wakes up from his chair while Miles runs to a building. The chopper's falling towards that same building, so Greer gets back in the chair only to find a fiery crash afoot. His surrogate is badly damaged, but he still grabs a rifle with one arm and runs after Miles. Chase is going on through these insane poverty-ridden streets where the citizens are taking arms. Miles is driven to a corner, so he tries to unload that EMP cannon, but no luck. He's forced to keep running, as Greer is closing in on him. Miles is briefly saved by a truck running Greer over, but he recovers immediately and chases him into a corner. Miles pleads that he's innocent.
I ain't done nothing.
But Greer wants the bag. He was about to look into it when a chunky hick shoots him with a double barrel. Miles grabs that bag and flees, while this honey boo-boo pig shoots Greer's surrogate down. Greer gets up from the stim chair where he wobbles and tumbles on the floor, calling out for his wife Maggie. Maggie comes home with a friend on the other end, and she finds Greer passed out on the floor. Somewhere else in a junkie house, Miles Strickland awakens to the sight of the Prophet. He's surrounded by the Prophet's men. and he says he wants to know who gave Miles that weapon. Miles really doesn't know either because the employer always kept his identity hidden. Meanwhile, the news reports of the helicopter crash inside a surrogate-free zone, so the residents aren't too happy about it. Their leader, the Prophet, didn't want war, but now that the first blow had been struck, he calls for a revolution. In some hospital, Greer wakes up to Maggie's surrogate. He thanks her for the help. Then they see a surrogate for kids TV ad, which Maggie promptly shuts off. Stone gets there for a visit and gives greeting for Maggie. Then she leaves the two to talk. Stone says the doctor says Greer is lucky to be alive. Greer wants a court order for Miles to track down the weapon, but Stone says he's suspended thanks to that outcry he caused. Despite Miles ending a lot of cops' lives, Stone says he'll handle this case personally, and that he'll get a new surrogate after the official statement. Stone says to take some time to heal, and then leaves. Too bad because Greer is discharging himself today. He meets up with Peters outside, and she's surprised he looks a lot like his own surrogate. While walking along the streets, it seems it's been a long time since Greer had stepped out into the world in his own body, so he has a total system shock.
I have an idea.
Peter has an idea and drags him into a cheap surrogate store, but he rejects the cheap model. Greer insists he wants to do the case, but he's very weak, so he bids her farewell.
I'm not gonna let you win.
And he goes to a dread zone, where surrogates aren't allowed. He's scanned and gets the go-ahead. Inside, he finds his crucified surrogate. Just in time because the Prophet is giving a lecture on the end of life, as Miles' life has ended.
It's a new beginning.
He drops a lecture on true humanity, not living a lie through machine puppets. Greer walks in just in time for the Prophet's declaration of the near end of surrogacy, and then they burn Miles' body. After the funeral, Greer waltzes over to the Prophet and his bodyguards and tells him that he just wants to talk to the Prophet about Miles. His bodyguards don't take too kindly to that as he's beaten, and then the Prophet allows him to talk. Greer's asking about the weapon, but the Prophet feigns ignorance, and then he promises if such a weapon existed, he'd have it delivered to him. So Greer is promptly shown the exit. In some RV, looks like our Prophet was lying and is charging the weapon. On the outskirts of town, some Richie Rich boy offers Greer a ride.
May I offer you a ride?
The snotty boy turns out to be Dr. Canner, and he says using his usual surrogates may be risky. Dr. Canner asks him how he lost his boy, and he says it was from a car accident. Then Greer says Miles is out of his mortal plane, but the doctor says that there's more to this than meets the eye. Cantor says this is a result of a billion-dollar weapons project, so he's asked to focus where the weapon came from. At Greer's house, Maggie and her friends are getting their rocks off to an electronic coil. Future Truly's doomed, and Greer shows up and catches Maggie partying. Well, she's worried about him not being at the hospital and in a surrogate, but Greer couldn't care less. A few moments pass, and Greer comes out of his room, only to catch his wife flirting with another surrogate. He beats up this smug-looking tool only to skin away the fake covering and have Maggie's friends laugh at him. He walks away in frustration. Maggie follows him to the alley. Maggie's asking what Greer wants, and he wants the real Maggie, but she's too much of a coward to understand that. They both walk away from each other.
Things have changed, Tom.
And Maggie actually goes offline for once and cries. Greer gets to the office doing a little research between VSI and the Army. Somewhere else, in a dark mansion, Peter's fast asleep, but gets stalked, and the files get peeked at. This assailant then finds the clip of Saunders saying they could access any surrogate they want. So the assailant goes and shoots Peters in her sleep multiple times, and then takes control of her surrogate. Greer then visits the general from before about the weapon, which he spills that it's not an EMP, it's an overload device. It's designed to shut down the surrogates with a virus.
It's called an OD.
But also shuts down the operators permanently. Who made it? You guessed it, the VSI. In exchange, Greer says the weapon is with the Prophet and his people, so the general goes out to scramble the military. Speaking of which, the Prophet then asks his men to hand over the weapon to Agent Peters. Ironically, the faker inside Peters' surrogate is snooping around the FBI's files. Later, Greer is seen visiting his wife at her job. He comes there to try to fix their relationship, but Maggie's surrogates just go offline. At the sign of the Human Coalition, the Army comes to their territory. They open fire at the Prophet and his men, but it turns out the Prophet is a surrogate. He's controlled by none other than Dr. Cantor.
My God.
A secret meeting's between Peters' surrogate and Greer, where it's revealed that Stone was the one who hired Miles to assassinate Cantor. Greer comes to confront Stone about it and then terminates his surrogate. He logs into his files using his surrogate and makes his big escape with Agent Peters' surrogate. Looking at the files, VSI wants Cantor gone because he's the one funding the profit. They still need the codes for the weapon, but on finding it, Peters betrays Greer in a setup car accident. She takes the weapon and leaves, but Greer puts up a fight. Eventually, it results with Greer running over a lot of people and then crashing the car, where he slips out of the FBI's hands. Greer contacts Saunders to shut Peters down, but he's already held hostage by Peters' surrogate. Greer calls Maggie to get off the surrogate because something might happen. Stone tries to calm him down, but it's revealed that Cantor's also pulling her strings. He's furious about his son getting whacked by Stone's assassination attempt. Cantor then fries him with the overload device.
That's for my son.
Greer then heads to the doctor's mansion, while Cantor, in Peters' surrogate, connects the OD to the surrogate network. Greer finds Cantor's hidden room, where he sees he's playing the prophet all along. Finally, the two meet in the flesh. He holds Greer at gunpoint, saying he's going to fry every surrogate and operator out there for his son. The codes' upload is complete.
My son's death will not have been in vain.
So he ends himself, and then Greer gets into Peters' surrogate and tries to stop the process with Saunders. He tells Greer an override code to unplug everyone, which is a success. Now that the operators are safe, time to save the surrogates. All Greer has to do is press yes.
Press the freaking button!
But he presses no, while Peters is shot. Almost everyone outside stops in their tracks. Greer then wanders the barren streets, and then actual people finally start going outside. Greer comes home, kicking down the door to his wife's room, but it's empty. He finds her in their son's old room, where they hug for the first time in many years. Time to unplug, because that's it for Surrogates. What'd you guys think about this Master of Puppets-esque movie? Drop your thoughts in the comments below using that hashtag Cinema Recap. This was Surrogates by Touchstone Pictures, starring Bruce Willis, Radha Mitchell, and Ving Rhames. Until the next OD attack, farewell.